by studying how the brain works and how our senses work, and by accumulating all this knowledge from the research that's being done in neuroscience, our brain, which is rewired. So when I see a problem, by having this knowledge that I have now, I see the problem in a different way. I solve it in a different way. Everything that I know about design and architecture and buildings is they're in layers. The whole thing becomes one whole. It's a holistic approach. It's not, okay, if I do this section, then I'm creating new brain cells. Maybe a little bit, maybe, if you pay attention to the amygdala and the fear. But there's so many different studies that talk about why people want their back at a wall as opposed to an open space.
That's actually a good question. Why?
Right? Because that's how you feel safe. Because if you don't know what's behind you, you don't feel safe. Because, some Italians.
So it's not the privacy. It's not the fact that you don't want anybody looking at your screen from behind you. It's more like it's also the subconscious piece of it is the safety factor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Everything stems from being safe, because that's the number one job of your brain, to keep you safe. So if you can't see behind you, you won't feel safe. If you go to a restaurant and you prefer to sit where you can see the door and have your back to a wall, you probably feel safer without knowing why you feel safer. In open spaces, when we design open spaces, logically, we know we're safe because, coworkers are not going to attack us and hunt us down. But our subconscious mind would feel more comfortable if we were in a smaller space where we could see everything around us.
So what's more effective for a company? Let's take a company work floor as an example. Is it more advised to have small offices with single offices, or a handful of people in every office, or no, one big area with comfy furniture tossed all around?
That was a concept that was exercised over and over. There are different aspects of being in an office. The short answer is to have a combination, to have areas, because part of being a complete human being and creating new brain cells and keeping your existing brain cells healthy is socializing and interaction. Interaction is very important in productivity in offices. So yes, you do want to have areas where people can gather and exchange ideas and socialize. But at the same time, if they need to read a document or focus on a task, they need to be in a closed space, an intimate space. So preferably the ultimate office building would have those areas, would have the open spaces where you're basically just doing tasks. Say in our profession, our CAD technicians are just, on the computer, and they can be talking to other people, and they're so good at what they're doing that it's just automatic, they're doing it. But when you need to calculate something, you really need to focus. That's when you want to go away and be in a more of an intimate space. The same thing could happen in your house. If you work from the house, you go to different. Take a look next time. See if you do better sitting in one area for reading, sitting in one area paying your bills, and sitting in one area to check your social media, and then if you're doing actual work, you usually go away into your real office. Most people work that way because they have figured out that that's the best way to work. In an open office, one of the projects that I worked on, I brought in the same idea into, they wanted open offices, but the workstations were designed so the actual workstation offered those different areas that you could actually do that within one workstation. And movement was part of that too, because movement needs to be encouraged in space.
Does movement also, and I'm assuming that interaction and movement as well and activity would integrate, pretty much engage creativity factors of the brain, not only just the fear or comfort or but also the creativity factor of it, the analogy factor, the analytical factor of the brain as well.
Absolutely.
So are these also considered, right?
Yes, absolutely. Movement
and the emotional factors as well, because the brains are also, when you go to the core of it, I know that it's not just, it's the safety and the safety, security, and the emotional factors are usually instinctive in the brain. So are these also considered?
Well, I would argue that emotion is part of the conscious brain as opposed to the unconscious brain.
Oh, is it? I thought it's the unconscious. Yeah.
Well, maybe our reaction to emotion is conscious, but the actual emotion is unconscious. So
you choose who to love?
Right? No, it's
I wish it was as simple.
It's very simple and it's very true, because you feel the feeling, but we're the ones giving it a voice, right?
Yeah.
We're assigning a label to it. The feeling comes and goes. We're the ones, it's the conscious mind that assigns it a label and gives it a meaning or tries to make some logic out of it.
So by the same logic, I should walk into the office and my brain should relate if I'm going to love the job or not based on how the office is pretty much designed and the layout.
No, it's not that simple. You should walk into an office loving the job that you love and excited about what you're going to be working on, and the space supports that.
The space supports it. Yeah, yes. Exactly. The space supports it. That's actually
I'll give you a human part of this as an example. One of my projects was the home franchise concepts. And it was headquarters for, it's in Irvine, headquarters for this office. And we moved everyone from their office in Orange, which was really old, and it was a maze, and people were, and I spent a good 6 months in that office, just watching how they work. It was a big organization. I needed
they operated and worked. Yeah.
Yes. I needed to interview everybody. I really needed to see how they work. And it was amazing. And I'm telling you, as an architect, I had a hard time finding my way around.
Wow.
So when we took them into the new space, one of the marketing people approached me and she said, I have to tell you that ever since we moved into this space, I pay attention to what I wear when I come to work, because for me, it's almost a celebration. I walk into this office and I feel that I'm celebrated by my environment. And it's not just beauty, because you can add glitz and it can be really daunting and it can really hurt you. I mean, it can be vulgar. The way it's designed, the way you give thought into the movement pattern, even how people move, how they perceive things, how there is a vestibule into something, and there's drama, and there's quietness, and there's movement, and there's interaction. There were areas that I designed, and most of these were not even communicated to the client. They were part of the design because, as good design needs to be experienced and not really described. There were areas that the paths would cross. So two departments that really needed to communicate would have to communicate. We placed them in such a way that they would have to get together and talk about their projects or what they're working on. It wasn't accidental. It was on purpose.
And did you really need neuroscience knowledge to go about this kind of design?
Well, I did, because, I consider myself a very knowledgeable architect, and whatever was out there, I studied it and knew about it. And it was until I studied how the brain functions, and then studied and became conscious of all the research that has been done that relates to our space, that I actually became conscious of how I can do things differently or a little better. When I was in school, I designed one clinic, and we're talking about, I'm not going to age myself, years ago when I was in graduate school. I designed a clinic, and this was a therapist's office. And what I did was I ramped up to the door of the office, a slight ramp that goes up, an incline. You go up, as you're walking, you feel heavy. But then as you're walking out, you feel light. Just slightly. This is as a student. And no, I didn't have any background in neuroscience or how the brain works, but I felt like there was something that we could do that was more than what we're doing.
But then, let me understand the logic. That's a very, very, very interesting example. What was the logic of it? That when you walk into that clinic, I hate going there. I'm burdened and I have to walk up. And
you feel heavy and you feel burdened as you're walking.
But wouldn't this make me not want to go there?
But when they're coming back, they feel light.
Of course, they feel like they're relieved.
That's what they remember. They remember that. Okay. Unconsciously, they remember, or they remember the feeling. We don't have real memories. We they're stories. It's the feeling that they remember.
So it's not as encouraging on their way in, but it's very relieving on the way out. And you're telling me that the memory that sticks is not the way in, but the way out.
Yes.
And that would welcome them to come more in the future if they needed to, because that
they feel relieved.
Exactly.
It just enhances, yes. It's just one more little thing that would help them to get the help they needed.
That's the thing, that neuroscience is not transactional in nature. It's not just one thing that you do. It's the holistic think set or thought process that you apply or deploy when you're building or adopting a certain design.
Yes,
putting it in place.
Because everything else is also relevant and important. Every part of the design process. Finding out the need of your end users, number one. What is it that they need?
Fariba, it's really interesting. How does it differ from one industry to the other, from one use case to the other, by age, by industry, for instance, do public offices and spaces need to be designed differently or considered differently, more around functionality rather than having to worry about the mental state of people or visitors coming to these public places? Do children hospitals needs to be designed different than adults hospitals? How do you incorporate these different metrics or
Yes.
dynamics?
To answer your questions, yes, everything needs to be tailored to the function. Every design process needs to start from the needs of the end users, or the end users, the people who work in those public spaces, or on the end users who are the ones visiting the office spaces. How many hours are they spending in at their visit? Are they sitting in? I'm going for a plan check. I sit in the lobby for a couple of hours, right? Do I need to be comfortable? Do I need to be able to get some work done while I'm waiting? One of the things that I noticed City of Long Beach did in their building department was that they renovated their office, and they put the plan checkers area in the back, which was a U shape, right? And then you had the counter, and then the architects and engineers were sitting on the other side. We put them on a platform. So when they were sitting on their chair, they were looking down at the architects and the engineers to give them power. Because before it was, two people sitting, and there's this person that's supposed to be in power, enforcing the code, needed to have more power. So they put him on a platform and raised them higher. So they were looking down, and you're looking up.
And the other people didn't feel that they're like
intimidated. Yes. Yes.
And that's okay.
That was the purpose. That was the purpose of that setting. And then, you could outsmart them, and you can stand at the counter, and continue the discussion. But it's this power play, and space plays a big role in that. That how do you use the space? In my practice, I like to use what I know, my knowledge, for betterment of the end users. I don't like to use it to manipulate people in, for example, losing money in casinos. I don't believe in that, and I know that there are studies that actually put that into effect. That how can we get people in casinos to play more and
to spend more?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes. It's doable, just like anything else.
Of course,
use it for good.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's been discussed and deployed as well. It's a really good dynamic.
It has. When I've come across a couple of architects who actually work with casino owners to see if they can do that.
And it's not only casinos. I could think of many other facets.
Yes. My example was casino, because that was the architect I met.
I mean, bars could use it for people to drink more. It's just another example. Or I don't know if that applies also to any living space. I mean, a car is not a living space, but it's still a saloon that we spend considerable time in. So also these dashboards and saloons could be designed to make people feel they want to speed more. Right. Yeah.
Make it look like a sports car. Make it look like a race car, and you will want to go a little faster.